Picture this. It's 11:30 at night. You get pulled over. The officer walks up to your window. "Have you had anything to drink tonight?" You answer honestly, "Yeah, I had a beer with dinner." 10 minutes later, you're standing on the shoulder doing field sobriety tests. You pass them. The officer pulls out a breathalyzer. You blow 0.00, zero alcohol. Most drivers think that's the end of the stop. But for some people, that's exactly when the real problem begins. Because the officer hasn't just been investigating alcohol, he's been investigating impairment. And the single decision point that determines whether this encounter ends or escalates happens right after that zero appears on the screen. If you miss that moment, you can talk yourself straight into an arrest. Here's how it happens. The trap starts with a question that sounds harmless. The officer looks at the breathalyzer, looks back at you, then asks. One piece of knowledge can change how a situation ends for you. Subscribe now so you're prepared. Then share this video and tell me what you think about it in the comments. So, if you haven't been drinking, is there anything else you've taken tonight? Most people think that danger is over. They just passed the tests. They just blew a zero. They're relieved. And relieved people talk. Just some prescription medication. Nothing serious. I took something for anxiety. I had a gummy earlier. It's legal where I bought it. The officer doesn't hear reassurance. The officer hears a brand new investigation. The alcohol investigation may have been over, but the drug-impaired driving investigation may have just begun. And that's why this question exists. Not because the officer is trying to trick you, because officers know impairment can come from many sources. Alcohol, prescription drugs, marijuana, sleep medications, illegal substances, even combinations of medications. A zero alcohol reading doesn't automatically mean a person is unimpaired, so officers are trained to keep investigating if they believe signs of impairment still exist. That's where the decision point appears. Not during the field sobriety tests, not during the breath test, not when the lights first come on. The decision point happens the moment the officer asks, "Is there anything else you've taken tonight?" Watch how quickly things can change. Officer, you blew a zero. Driver, okay. Officer, have you taken anything else tonight? Driver, just my anxiety medication. Officer, what medication? Driver, prescription stuff. Officer, when did you take it? Driver, a few hours ago. Officer, does it affect your driving? Driver, sometimes it makes me tired. At that moment, the encounter has completely changed. The driver thinks he's being cooperative. The officer now has statements that may support continued investigation. More questions come, more scrutiny, possibly a drug recognition evaluation, possibly blood testing, possibly arrest depending on the totality of circumstances. Notice what caused the escalation. Not the breath test, not the field sobriety tests, the conversation. Now, let's look at the same situation differently. Officer, you blew a zero. Driver, okay. Officer, have you taken anything else tonight? Driver, I choose not to answer questions. That's it. That's the phrase. Easy to remember, easy to say. I choose not to answer questions. Let's say it again. I choose not to answer questions. One more time. I choose not to answer questions. Notice what this response does. It doesn't argue, it doesn't accuse, it doesn't challenge the officer, it doesn't lie. It simply stops the driver from becoming a witness against himself. And that's the key. Many people believe they get arrested because officers discover evidence. Sometimes, but often people create evidence through their own statements. The officer asks, the driver explains. The explanation becomes part of the investigation. The investigation expands. The driver keeps talking. The situation gets worse. That's the decision point, the moment the conversation shifts from alcohol to admissions. Now, here's what usually happens next. The officer may push back. Officer, if you've done nothing wrong, why not answer? Driver, I choose not to answer questions. Officer, I'm just trying to understand what's going on. Driver, I choose not to answer questions. Officer, are you refusing to cooperate? Driver, I choose not to answer questions. Notice something important. The response doesn't change. Many drivers think they need a new answer every time. They don't. The more words you add, the more opportunities you create. The safest response is often the shortest one. Now, let's clear up a major misunderstanding. Refusing to answer questions does not mean refusing lawful commands. Those are different things. If an officer lawfully orders you out of the vehicle, that's separate. If state law requires identification, that's separate. If the officer issues instructions related to the stop, that's separate. The decision point we're discussing involves voluntary statements, words, explanations, admissions, not lawful commands, and that's an important distinction. The legal foundation is actually very simple. The Fifth Amendment protects people from being compelled to incriminate themselves. You generally have the right to remain silent when officers ask investigative questions. The protection isn't activated because you gave a brilliant speech. It's activated because you stop talking. That's why the phrase works. Not because it's magic, not because it guarantees you'll avoid arrest. And it doesn't. No phrase can do that. What it does is prevent you from providing additional information that may expand the investigation. That's the goal. Nothing more, nothing less. So let's put everything together. You're stopped. The officer suspects impairment. You perform field sobriety tests. You blow a zero. Most drivers relax. That's the mistake, because the real decision point arrives immediately afterwards. The officer asks, "Have you taken anything else tonight?" If you start explaining medications, substances, prescriptions, gummies, sleep aids, or anything similar, you've potentially opened an entirely new line of investigation. Instead, remember the phrase, "I choose not to answer questions." Short, calm, professional. No argument, no attitude, no debate. Just the phrase. Because the trap isn't the breathalyzer. The trap isn't the field sobriety test. The trap is believing the investigation ended when the alcohol investigation ended. Sometimes that's exactly when a different investigation begins. And the difference between those two outcomes often comes down to a single moment, a single question, a single answer. I choose not to answer questions. Remember the trap. Recognize the decision point. Use the phrase. Because the smartest drivers aren't the ones who talk the most. They're the ones who recognize the decision point before the officer does.